What's going on, everyone? Philly Insider. We've got a trade. The Phillies have acquired Austin Hayes. They traded Cristian Pache and Seranthony Dominguez. We're going to get into all of it. I really like this move, first off, just to say that I'm very, very excited about the potential of this. At the very least, I think Austin Hayes is a really good platoon for Brandon Marsh. That, like, you needed one. You needed at least a platoon this deadline. And I also think he can push Rojas for at bats if you need him to do that. And ideally, going into this deadline, you found someone who could do both of those, who could platoon with Marsh at the very least. If nothing more than that, you get your platoon. And at best, they can push Rojas for at bats and potentially carve out some playing time there. If Rojas is not hitting well, it gives you options. And I had Austin Hayes as someone who I looked at like months ago. I really didn't look too far into his numbers. And I thought, even though Baltimore's outfield was crowded, he was an all-star last year, right? Like I know he's not necessarily heralded as a star around the league. I just thought they would probably end up holding on to him. So I wasn't expecting him to get moved per se. I'm not super shocked he got moved either. I mean, look, the O's get a reliever who can hopefully help their back end. The Phillies get a guy who fills a big need in the outfield for a bat. I mean, you needed a guy out there. You just did. And you needed a guy who's going to match lefties. We'll get into that. He does that and more. So I really like what Austin Hayes brings to the table. He's under contract this year and next year, and that was kind of the thinking with the potential Lane Thomas move was you were going to have him as the platoon for Brandon Marsh next year as well, and that's what you get with Austin Hayes. You get a guy who's under contract until 2026. He's on the books for 2.2 million this year in arbitration, and again, keep in mind the Phillies are paying the next couple months of that, right? They're not paying the full 2.2 million. And next year, I don't know what his arbitration is going to be, but he hasn't played quite as well this year. I imagine he'll still make a decent bit of money. But point being, I mean, between the trade and the actual money cost, the Phillies really didn't give up anything because you think about it, Sir Anthony was going to be the fifth or sixth arm out of the pen in the playoffs. That's just where he's at this point. He was not having his best year. I wish him the best. He had a lot of good moments in the playoffs with the Phils. He had a lot of good moments in general with the Phillies too, especially just coming back from Tommy John surgery and doing what he did. Really impressed with just the way he went about his business and just the comeback he had from that injury. So credit to him. Definitely going to miss him because he seems like a good dude. He was a really key arm for us in that 2022 postseason. And last year, while he didn't quite have it, he still had some really good postseason outings. But you gave up him, and by doing that, you now free up an extra spot in the bullpen. So you can add two relievers if you want to. You don't have to, but you have that room now. And you gave up Cristian Pache. I mean, that guy wasn't going to be on the roster past the deadline. Just the reality of the situation. He was going to get DFA'd most likely. So you got him off the team onto another roster. Also, look, Cristian Pache had some good moments last year. Definitely hit lefties well last year. Just was not doing it this year. So credit to him. Had a good year last year with the Phils, but was not healthy. Couldn't replicate it this year when healthy. So he's a great defender. I mean, he's a good bench piece for a number of teams. We'll see what the Orioles do with him, but you didn't give up any prospects. You really didn't give up anything of crazy value. And in the process, you made it easier to go out and get a bullpen piece, which I think it's inevitable. The Phillies are going to go out a bullpen guy for sure. There's a number of guys we could talk about. I don't love the reliever market this year, but if you could go out and get a guy like Jimmy Garcia, who will have a video on him soon, I would love that. And then maybe you get a lefty like Tanner Scott, which his market's going to be a little bit bigger, I think, just because he's having a really good year, and I think there's a number of teams interested. But point being, you really didn't give up anything. And looking at Austin Hayes here, looking at his numbers against lefties over the years, I mean, this guy's been an 800 OPS guy versus lefties in 2 of the past 4 years, and last year he was a 786 hitter against lefties. 2022 was a bit odd for him, 703 OPS. He did not have his best year versus lefties. I'm not sure what the reason for that was, but that's more so an outlier. And again, looking at all these numbers, weighted runs created plus, 140 in 2021, 104 even in his down year against lefties in 2022, 115 in 2023, and then 154 in 2024. This guy's hit lefties well for some time. The one thing about him, I think that kind of turned me off to him at like when I said I looked at him a couple months ago, he's not the most patient hitter, but last year his walk rate against lefties was 9.6. That'll play. This year it's 7%. Not the best, but it's not the worst either. I'm not expecting him to have the most competitive or patient at bats, but I do think he'll have good at bats versus lefties. And his strikeout rate has been as low as 15% in 2021, 20.5% in 2022 and 22.2% in 2023. This year, for whatever reason, his strikeout rate is up versus lefties, which is odd. He hasn't really been hitting for the same power this year that he usually does. He's had a little bit of a down year in some ways, but he's still producing in a number of ways as well. So I'm not super concerned. And again, if he's going to see mostly lefties, he's going to be fine. I do think, again, he could push Rojas for at bats. I think you're going to see him play more than just a platoon, but not every day, if that makes sense. It makes a whole lot of sense to me. Just I really don't see a lot of issues with this deal. Runners in scoring position, he hasn't been hitting the best this year. That's always something I like to look at with the players we acquire, the outfielders we're interested in. And I will say it was unfortunate Randy Rosarena went off the board last night. I would have loved to have him, but point being, you get a guy. I mean, this really is. Austin Hayes was not necessarily on my radar today. Looking at outfield bats, I didn't know if he was going to get moved, but I really think this worked out well for the Phils. Like, I really don't see too many problems. And the reason I say he can push Rojas for at bats, he hasn't been a terrible hitter versus righties. He's obviously not as good versus righties, but I mean, he's had years where he's hit well against them. 2022, he was a 725 OPS guy against righties, and then 2023, he was a 763 OPS guy against righties. Obviously, this year has not been the same. 67 weighted runs created plus, and then a 585 OPS. So he's not seeing righties well this year. Might just not be in the cards for him to face too many righties, but weighted runs created plus were 108 in 2022 and 111 in 2023 versus righties. So the potential is there. I mean, he hasn't been a bad hitter versus righties in his career. He doesn't have to just strictly be a platoon. And I think he can be a valuable player for them too. And talking about his defense, this is really the big thing is I just mentioned Randy Rosarena. You're bringing in a guy in here. If you get Randy, your defense is going to significantly downgrade because he's not a platoon. He's probably going to play every day. Then you have Marsh in center, who I think Marsh is good in center. I don't think he's great. And it's obviously not the same as having Rojas out there. And then you have Randy in left, who's not a good defender. I mean, he's athletic. He's not a good defender. So your defense in left center field significantly downgrades there. You have Castellanos in right as well. With this move, you can still have Rojas in center from time to time, but you have Marsh in center. Again, like I said, good center fielder. You have Austin Hayes in left, who's a very, very good defensive outfielder. His metrics this year aren't the best, but looking back at his time in left field, this is just left field specifically. In 2020 and 2021, he had 4 defensive runs saved in each of those seasons. 2022, it was 3. 2023, it was 6. For whatever reason this year, -4. Again, I haven't watched a ton of Austin Hayes. I don't know how he's been defensively. I know he's had a couple notable mishaps over the years in left field, but overall, he's been a really good defender out there. And he has a really good arm too. So his arm rating on Fangraphs is really good. On Savant, his arm rating is really good as well. Like he's an 87th percentile in arm strength. Again, a lot of things to like about him out there. Looking at outs above average, I mean, he's been mostly positive out there. Again, it's really only -1 this year, so they're a little kinder than defensive runs saved have been to him. Last year, he was +1 in outs above average in left field. 2022, for whatever reason, it was -5, and then in 2021, it was -2. So, but again, like if those are some of his worst years defensively, that's still a lot better than a lot of the other options that were on the market, right? So you're not only getting a good platoon and a guy who can potentially push Rojas for at bats, you're still maintaining a pretty good level of defense out there when Rojas isn't on the field and when Marsh isn't on the field. And he can play right as well. I'm really not sure how good he is in right. I haven't watched him a ton out there. I think he's around the same, probably pretty solid. I don't think they're going to move Castellanos out of there, but let's say he gets hurt. That's an option as well. You still have a guy to put out there. And let's say Castellanos slumps and Rob does make a move in the playoffs where he's like, all right, you're not getting this at bat or you're not playing this day, which again, I don't see that happening. It does give you an option there as well. So I really like this move. I think it makes sense for a plethora of reasons, offensively, defensively. He's not the fastest guy. He's definitely not the slowest guy either. Like he'll be fine on the base paths, I think. I haven't taken a look at how good he's been, like his run values. I think they're pretty even for the most part. So that's pretty much what I got on Austin Hayes. If you guys got questions, I'm going to get through some of these comments here. I saw a number of you were in here before the stream started, but I love this move. You didn't give up much. You got a guy who fits exactly what you need, a right-handed bat, a guy who's going to platoon, could play more than just a platoon as well, but not every day. I think it's a pretty clear solution to the outfield problem, and I think it makes a ton of sense. And again, you not only free up a bullpen spot with not having Seranthony now, you didn't give up anything, again, to get Austin Hayes. So you now have a bullpen spot open, and you still have assets to go get that bullpen guy as well, or two. So it just makes a ton of sense to me. But I'm going to get through these comments here. And yeah, like Ben said, out of left field, I don't think too many people had him on their radar, but I I did know he was looking for an extension, wasn't getting it, and it was a little crowded in Baltimore. So it makes a lot of sense. Welcome in. It looks like we got an Orioles fan in here. Hey, we'll see if we see you guys in the playoffs. It's tough to get to the World Series, but hopefully that would be crazy. Yes, Ted. Hopefully I answered your question. Yeah, like our O's fan here says, Paige is pretty good. I mean, again, not the best at the plate, but certainly can contribute there in the specific role he's going to be in Philadelphia. And yeah, hopefully I explained about Dominguez. Like he's not having his best year right now. There's still a lot of potential there. He's still had some really good years, big postseason moments too. I still think he could be a really good pitcher, but the Phillies have a number of guys who are ahead of him in the pecking order right now in the bullpen, and he wasn't necessarily needed. So, like Ben said, awesome for a few years in the past. Big downturn this year and last year, sure, but again, he can platoon. And again, I think there's potential with Kevin Long to where he could become a little more than a platoon as well. And even just getting here too, maybe just change of pace, change of scenery, maybe that does him well. So I like it a lot. Yeah, I miss seeing Bautista on the mound too. That guy's awesome. Felix is the man. And Martian says, I'm not familiar with his game. Did we get better as a whole? Yeah, hopefully I answered that question too. I definitely think so. And like Ben said, we gave up very, very little, just like I said. Yeah, you could say that. I mean, again, I think Seranthony's fine def, but you can certainly improve from him. So, and like Sean said, other than Mason Miller, what difference makers are on the market? So for relievers, I'm kind of with you, Sean. There's not a lot of difference makers. I think Jimmy Garcia, that is the guy to me. Like he's my number one target for bullpen guys. I think he's the guy. Like I would absolutely prioritize him. Maybe he'll cost a little more because he's one of the better relievers on the market. I know he's coming back from injury. He looked really good the other day. I mean, he just struck out the side on July 20th. I don't know if he's pitched since then. I'm going to take a look. Obviously, we'll see how he works back from that injury, but I certainly think he's a really good bullpen piece. You check out his Savant page, you just watch him pitch. I mean, the guy has 3-4 pitches that play versus righties and lefties. So he throws, I believe, 4 pitches versus righties, and then he throws 3 pitches versus lefties. I think he actually might throw 5 versus righties, but depends on how you categorize the sweeper and then the slider. Point being, it's rare to get a guy out of the bullpen who can do that and do it at the success rate he's doing it at this year too. Like he's been really, really impressive. Obviously, a lot of it was before he got hurt, but again, he looked really good the other day. Okay, so on July 20th, or 24th, he did give up a run, had a walk and a hit, did strike out a couple guys. So he's working back from it again. Like that's going to happen from time to time. I'm not super, super concerned about that. Like it's just a blip on the radar to me. It's going to happen. Again, he hasn't pitched in the big leagues in a while. He's working back from the injury right now. I'm not super concerned about him having a little bit of a rough outing the other day. And again, if his rough outing is giving up 1 run right after injury, that's fine. I mean, it's going to happen. Now we must address the pen and the bench. Yeah, I don't know if they're going to add a bench bat necessarily. I mean, again, they could definitely use one, but we'll see. I would certainly like a left-handed bench bat, but I'm not going to expect that. Maybe it happens. I don't know. I mean, it's possible. I don't have too many guys on my radar necessarily. But as far as the pen goes, yeah, they're going to add 1 to 2 guys for sure. At the very least, they're adding 1 guy. That's inevitable. And Ben, like Ben says, this sets them up for making a bullpen move or 2 for sure. Absolutely, it does. Absolutely, it does. I mean, it just makes so much sense. I know I keep saying that, but I love it. Calvin, welcome in. He says, great and completely unexpected move, in my opinion. Yeah, like I said, I was someone who looked at him a couple months ago. Even I was not expecting this, even now, but I really like it. And like you said, definitely expecting 1 or 2 bullpen trades. And yeah, I like Seranthony too. Like I'll miss him, but I think it's for the best. It's a good move for the Phils. Yeah, and like you said, Calvin, we gave up no prospects. A lot of you guys said this. That's the biggest thing. You really gave up nothing to go get Austin Hayes, who fills a clear need for this team right now. So, yep, absolutely. I would love to add a right-handed reliever. If you can add a righty and a lefty, that'd be ideal. But I don't think the handedness matters so much, and a lot of the guys on the market are righties too. But sorry, I didn't answer your question, Sean. As far as difference makers go, there's not a ton of guys. There really aren't. Like I said, I kind of did answer this question, but Garcia is really the guy. Carlos Estevez, I'd be fine with that. I don't think he's the best move, but I think he lengthens the bullpen. And I think if you're going to go that route or the Kyle Finnegan route, you're going to have to really rely upon Alvarado and Kerkering to turn it around, right? Like, I don't think you can necessarily rely on a Finnegan or a Estevez to be that guy in the 7th or 8th inning, but they could be that guy when the other guys aren't available. That's kind of how I view it. Finnegan is a real red flag to me because he has the most pitch clock violations and he gives up hard contact. Those are 2 major red flags. He does a lot of good things. His stuff is very good, but I don't know. I'm very wary of him. Like I don't know. I just wouldn't love that move. Um, Estevez, like he did cut his walk rate significantly this year, which is huge. Had a really poor second half last year, so I don't know how much I trust it. I do think he's got pretty good stuff as well. I don't know. He just scares me a little bit. I'm not sure how he would perform in the big moment, being a guy who pitched for Colorado and Los Angeles. And again, it really is the second half from last year. He really fell apart down the stretch. So I'm someone who's higher on him, but I understand the concern there. There's not really a ton of other guys like Michael Kopech. Sure, the stuff is great, but he walks a ton of guys and he doesn't necessarily have the best command. Tanner Scott, everything looks good with him. It's just the walk rate. That is like my only concern. If you can get him and a guy like Jimmy Garcia or Estevez, I'd be fine with that because you get a lefty and a righty. Hopefully one of them pans out. But to me, Jimmy Garcia is really like, hopefully I'm saying his name right. Jimmy, I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced. If you guys can let me know, feel free. Like those are the two guys who I'm like, those are the only other difference makers outside of Mason Miller. And obviously Mason Miller just got hurt yesterday too. That's worth mentioning, but that's kind of where I'm at on that, on the relievers right now. So, oh, big downturn for Seranthony. My bad, Ben. No, yeah. I mean, it has been a downturn for Seranthony. I would say also for Hayes, he hasn't had his best year, but more so for Seranthony for sure. No, that's absolutely right. Gonna miss Seranthony, but this looks good. Like, welcome in. He says, good platoon for Marsh, but they clearly couldn't trust him. Gave up next to nothing for a piece we really needed. Exactly. I mean, that pretty much perfectly sums it up. I feel like his underlying numbers are really good on Savant. So if you have some information, okay, he said scratch that. Yeah, his numbers are really, really good. Last year, like, his numbers have fluctuated a little bit through the year on Savant, but I think overall they've been really encouraging. And again, doesn't walk a ton of guys. I don't want to say too much on Garcia because I do have a video coming out on him, but there's not a lot of concerns. Like he doesn't violate the pitch clock. He doesn't have a lot of runners stealing on him. I'm trying to think of other things like just general red flags you would have. Like he doesn't ever bulk, which that should be a given, but for some guys it isn't. Obviously, we're going off of Kimbrel last year, so there's a lot of these concerns you want to make sure to address when looking at potential relievers. He strikes out a lot of guys. He doesn't walk a lot of guys. He has 52 holds over the past 3 years. Like the guy's pitched in high leverage spots. Only 4 wild pitches in his career, I believe. That I might be incorrect on that. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to double check it right now, but I mean, I think that's a guy who I would really want. I mean, not only are the numbers good on Savant, the underlying numbers are good. You watch him, you can see the eye test, like all the pitches play well. He has a good arsenal of pitches, more of an arsenal than most relief pitchers. He doesn't walk guys. Like everything there is pretty encouraging. Again, a guy who's been in big spots, has a ton of holds. And as far as wild pitches go, yeah, he has 4 total in his whole career. That's not a big concern of mine. He did struggle in 2021 with Houston, and he has had some struggles in the playoffs before. But I also think he's a way better pitcher now than he was back then. I mean, he's throwing the fastball faster than he ever has before. So Garcia, to me, like he's peaking right now. I think you get him with Cotham. He's going to reach some really, really good heights, or like new heights, honestly, as a reliever. And I think he would make a lot of sense to add to this team. So Garcia, to me, again, he's my top guy. That is the guy I really want at this deadline. Calvin says, I see Hoffman and Alvarado as the 2 big guns, and Strom and Soto as your next year. I think if you get either a top gun or 2 Strom level guys, you're set. Yeah, I would agree with that. I see Hoffman and Strom as like the 2 guys. I know they're not going to use Strom as like their second big gun, but I see him as a guy who can absolutely do that. We saw it in the postseason last year in Game 4 of the NLDS. He came through in a pretty big spot. He came in with runners on the corners, no outs, and he gets through that inning. Soto put him in that spot too. Like Soto, to me, is not a high leverage guy. If guys aren't available and there's a lefty portion of the lineup up, sure, I might put him in, but not a guy I trust a ton. But I think he's going to stick around here. I don't see him going anywhere. And so I see Hoffman and Strom as the top 2. And then I see Alvarado and Kerkering as like the 2 behind them. And then I kind of see like Soto and the rest of the bullpen. Soto's probably a tier up from some of the other guys who are below him, obviously, because some of them aren't going to be in the roster. But that's kind of how I view the bullpen right now. But point being, like you said, if you get another top gun, like if you get Mason Miller for the right price, sure, I don't think it's going to happen. Or if you get 2 strong level guys, sure, that's totally fine with me. Or if you get something in between that, like 2 guys in between that, fine. I mean, that's absolutely fine with me. If dealing with the Nationals, I'd be more interested in Hunter Harvey than Kyle Finnegan. I would be too. I'm not really interested in Hunter Harvey per se, though. Like you said, I don't really want Finnegan, but I also don't necessarily want Hunter Harvey either. If we got either of them, would I be throwing a tantrum? No. I mean, I wouldn't be super upset. But to me, they're back end guys rather than top end guys. I know Hunter Harvey is, I think, top of the league in holds this year. Last I checked, he has had some good numbers, but he does guys do hit the ball pretty hard off of him. So the Nationals relievers just scare me a decent bit. Yeah, Mason Miller absolutely does move the needle. I think Garcia does as well. I don't think Garcia is one of those guys who I don't think a lot of people know about, who is really, really talented. Again, I know I'm hyping him up a lot here. I have a lot of belief in him. But Mason Miller also costs a lot, and he's under control for years. The A's do not have to move him this year. They don't. I mean, they just don't have to move him if they don't get the right deal. And there's other teams that are going to be competing for a potential trade for him too. So I just don't see it happening. Interesting 2-for-1. Welcome in, Jonathan. Good to see you in here. He says, not upset about losing Seranthony. It's been a while since he's been dominant. Absolutely. And again, he was your fifth or sixth option out of the pen this year. I love Seranthony, but you really didn't give up much for a real need on this team. It makes a lot of sense. Ian says, we do need to make some pen moves, but Mason Miller is going to be really tough. He's young, tons of years of control, pumps gas, and he's been locked down. It's going to cost a lot, but hope to do it. Yeah, exactly, Ian. I mean, it would be awesome if we could get him on the roster. Like, I would be ecstatic. I just don't see how you do it without giving up guys who the front office does not want to give up. I just don't see it as realistic right now. Calvin says, how long is Hayes under team control? He is under contract this year, so the rest of this year, obviously, and then next year. So you have a platoon for Marsh for the next year and a half. And that was again, I said this earlier, the thinking with Lane Thomas was, part of the thinking was, you can have a platoon for a year and a half. And that's exactly what you're getting with Austin Hayes. I think it makes a lot of sense. So Joe Mazza, welcome in. I like the UPenn profile picture. Love it. And he says, Pache was on the way out. Seranthony too. Exactly. Talked about this earlier in the stream, so go check it out. Said, not a huge move, but Hayes matches lefties and under club control for a year and a half. Exactly. And again, a guy who has had years where he hasn't been terrible versus righties. He's not a great hitter versus righties, but there's potential to be more than a platoon, especially with Kevin Long there. So, and again, a good defensive guy. You're not losing anything defensively in left field at all. It's just not, it makes so much sense. It's not going to really hurt you in any way. At the very least, he's a platoon. So it makes a lot of sense to me. It'll just be tough. And there are tons of teams that are going to want Mason Miller too, Ian says. And yeah, like you said, Ian, a lot of teams have more to give for Mason Miller than we do. We don't have the farm. Like, our farm is better, but we don't quite have the farm to go get a guy like Mason Miller. If, let's say, Baltimore, who we just traded with, they could absolutely go get Mason Miller if they wanted to. It just depends on how much they want to give up, but they're going to have their best package is going to be better than our best package. And there's going to be teams who I'm sure are offering that are going to have some better packages than us. So I don't expect it either. And like Sean said, Hayes is a pretty professional hitter. Yeah, they absolutely do need that. He does have, like I said, I don't think he's the most patient guy. I don't think he's going to put up the most competitive at bats, but I think he will put up very competitive at bats versus lefties at the very least. And I think there's potential there to get better against righties too. And I think he has been better versus righties in the past. So Trauma absolutely can come in big spots. He has no fear. Exactly, Calvin. I mean, that guy has some guts. I love Matt Strom. Jonathan says, I feel big move coming. Possible. Again, you didn't give up much in this move, so there's potential for a bigger move. I don't see a lot of big moves on the market right now, to be quite honest, but it's a possibility. Anybody but Taiwan, I don't even want to talk about him right now. I mean, that's a topic for a different time. But what would you give for Mason Miller? Not enough. I wouldn't. Whatever I'm going to give, it wouldn't be what the Orioles it wouldn't be what the A's would take. Like, I probably wouldn't give up Mason or Aiden Miller for him or Andrew Painter. And you're going to need to give up one of them to get Mason Miller. So I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but that's just kind of where I see it. And yeah, I see your next comment. You give up anybody, Aiden Miller and Painter. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't see that getting the deal done. I don't think it's going to happen. It'd be great if we could give up Abel and Crawford, but I think the A's would hang up the phone because they're going to have a lot of better offers. So yeah, if you got Mason Miller, it'd be crazy. I don't know if they would move him back to the rotation. He tried as a starter, didn't work out so well. That's why he's in the bullpen right now. So I just don't think that's gonna be the case. I don't think you would want him battling back for a rotation spot. But again, I'd be absolutely stoked if we could get him. And I think he's better in the bullpen too. So maybe they move him back to the rotation. I don't know. I just think at this point he's a bullpen guy. Joe says, keep in mind that for those that want to trade from the farm for Mason Miller, dude missed a portion of 2022 with a shoulder issue and a good portion of 23 with a UCL sprain. Yeah. And now he has the finger thing where he was on the trainer table. There's been different reports about how that happened. So I'm not going to try to guess whether it was frustration or whether it was just the way he was doing his training on the table. I don't know. But point being, like you said, he's been injured. There's potential for injury with how hard he throws as well. I don't know about the mechanics, what I can't break that down for you if there's potential for injury with the way he throws the ball either. But it's a lot to give up, like you said, Joe, for a guy who isn't guaranteed to be fully healthy. But again, at the same time, he's an incredible talent. If we got him, I'd be stoked. I just don't think they're going to trade to the farm for him, and I don't think they should. Like Calvin said, I would do it if there's no Miller or Painter involved. Sure, I'm fine with doing that. I just don't think the A's there's any world in which the A's take a deal like that. So, yeah, I agree, Jonathan. I think Hayes is a better version of Lane Thomas. That's a great way to put it. And Lane Thomas is a guy similar role. Like he can hit lefties. He's a little more than a platoon where there's potential for him to hit righties. Hayes is way better defensively, though. I mean, Lane Thomas is not a good defender. He's got a great arm, doesn't play the outfield very well. And I don't know if he would have been a great fit in left field. Hayes is an awesome fit there. I mean, he's had really good years defensively. He's had some kind of down years defensively, but again, like I said earlier in the stream, even those down years are better than a lot of guys' down years. So, I mean, some of his down years were probably just straight up average too. I haven't watched all of his years defensively and every ball that got hit to him, but just from what I've seen and what I've read and what I've looked at by the numbers, I mean, he's going to be a good defensive left fielder, and you don't sacrifice that by adding a guy like him. So Sean says Mason Miller. Yeah, I mean, again, we'll love it, but just not going to happen. So Dylan, welcome in. Good to see you in here. Stoked. Yeah, I mean, I love this deal. This makes a lot of sense. I keep saying that. To me, it's just a great deal on paper. We'll see how it pans out, but I don't have any complaints with this deal. This makes a lot of sense to me. Sean says, other thing with Miller, pitcher in a big park in Oakland. Yep, no fans and pressure. Totally different than pitching in Philly. Yeah. I mean, you could argue in Philly, he's going to have 40,000 fans behind him, right? It's not for everyone, but when you know those fans are behind you and they have your back, a little bit different than going into Citizens Bank as an opponent, right? So I'm not super concerned about that. The bigger ballpark, that is a little bit of concern with how hard he throws. Obviously, there's going to be some baseballs that travel a little further if the barrel gets there too. But that's not something that would necessarily be a big factor or deterrent in going after him. I just don't think it's just going to be the logistics of the deal. I just don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, Jonathan said CBP is a much smaller field than Camden Yards. I believe they changed the dimensions out in left field at Camden Yards like a couple years ago or something. Maybe I'm incorrect, but point being, yeah, that obviously the fences are shorter, a little more hitter friendly too. I think Austin Hayes is going to be fine here. So if you guys got any more questions, we're coming up on the half hour mark. That's really everything I got. Again, I don't have much else to say. If there's any other questions or opinions you guys wanted me to share, please feel free. This was a great deal for the Phils, in my opinion. I don't like on paper. Again, I don't see how Dombrowski could have done a better job with this deal specifically. I wasn't expecting us to get a deal done before the deadline. I thought it was going to be on deadline day. That's what it's been the past couple of years, but I'm very happy. I mean, you're going to get him in the building for the next couple of days. You get him a little bit early and you get him comfortable, and then you're going to add a bullpen arm or two before Tuesday as well. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. And look, I love Pache. Like you said, Dylan, amazing defender, was much better versus lefties last year, but he hasn't been doing it at the plate with the bat this year. Just hasn't happened. And he was going to be off the roster regardless in 6 days or whatever, whenever the deadline is. 5 days, 6 days, 4 days. He wasn't going to be on this roster beyond that. So the fact that you were able to move him and attach him as part of that deal, perfectly fine. Oh, you meant defensively. Yeah, that too. A little less ground to cover as well. That's a great point as well. And yeah, like Ben said, you're right about Camden Yards. They moved the left field fence back like 30 feet. Yeah. So yeah, to both of your guys' points, a little more ground to cover there for a left fielder. And as a hitter, that's also going to be a little more friendly to him too. So works out both ways. He should have a little bit better of a time in Philadelphia, I would think. And again, change of scenery. He was looking for a new destination at some point. He wasn't going to be there beyond his contract. So I'm very curious to see how this works out in Philadelphia. And if it goes well, maybe bring him back beyond this contract. But for right now, I love having him for a year and a half control. Makes a lot of sense to me. And get like Calvin said, thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate all you and the community we have here for these streams. Again, this is middle of the day. A lot of people are at work, and we had like 20, 30 people in here. So I really appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments if you're watching the replay on this deal. And we will be live again the next time the trade happens, but I will also have a video on a couple relievers before the deadline breaks. Or before the deadline hits on Tuesday. So keep an eye out for those. And on Tuesday, we will have a live stream. I want to say we're going to go live at 5:30 to 6:30 so that we will have the stream 30 minutes leading up to the deadline and then 30 minutes after the deadline passes. And we'll be able to discuss everything that happened, didn't happen, But yeah, Jonathan, thank you for tuning in. I mean, I just go live and talk to you guys on here, so I appreciate y'all. Pete, thank you for tuning in. Always appreciate you, and thank you, Ben, for tuning in. I will see you guys later. Enjoy your guys' day, enjoy your weekend, and enjoy your trade deadline. We'll see you guys later. Phillies got Austin Hayes. Peace. God bless.